Hello folks, I'm Melly Little and this is your daily TA wrap. Well, we take a look at these markets and we do it from a neoclassical perspective, asking ourselves what happened today and what does it tell us about tomorrow. You know, I do this show 4 times a week. I do it every Monday through Thursday, live at 9 o'clock Eastern Time here from the base of what will be a very snowy night in the Rocky Mountains. Folks, I'm glad you could join me. We had a number of things we were looking at yesterday. We finally were getting some action that was going to give us some indication as to where these markets might want to go. And we were looking at the Russell in particular, if you remember. But I'm going to actually start the night a little bit differently than usual. And the reason for that is that we saw some damaging action overseas last night. In particular, we saw some big moves in some of the indexes overseas. Here's the CAC. It's the CAC 40 out of France. Big move down, breaks the range. You know, a bunch of these stocks, or I should say markets, have had ranges and have had stretches. This range was in this area, and then your lower range is right below it. Well, this thing just blew away the range. Volume picks up, and it breaks down into the bottom half of the range. But what's more important is when you get ranges, what happens is you get swing points that set up, right? All those swing points got taken out, and the reason that that's important, if you think about it logically, right? You had 2 sets of swing points taken out there. When that happens, the reason you get that kind of an escalation to the downside is because there's a lot of stops that build up there. You know, one of the things I found in my book, the latest book that I wrote, the one that I talked about, or I have talked about, Trend Trading Setups, is that when you get those kind of moves, what's taking place is multiple breaks of multiple swing points, and if it does it on multiple time frames, it's even more damaging. These happen to be actually, let me go back to that. I believe it's localized to the, well, that's not quite true. Let me pull over this and I'll show you here. Let me get this over out of the way, pull this over. You actually have a break on this time frame as well. So you got a swing point low here on October 14th. That's 41.92. You close today 41.72. So you actually have breaks on multiple time frames, not a single time frame. That is a more damaging situation. That can lead to a larger move to the downside, and we just saw what that looked like here on the range trade, right? So the range was basically up in here. If you take and double that back down, you get to about right there. So that would be your target, and given the way this thing broke, you could easily just head straight back down there without any kind of a stop. You know, and typically you get two to three bars on the way down on the largest time frame, and in this case it's this time frame, although this is your weekly, and that really hasn't broke until the end of the week. So bear that in mind. Right now you're looking at the daily is the only one that applies. I would think a fast move down to the bottom of that range would probably be the extent of it. Now let's go look at the DAX right quick, because once they started to break over there, they all started to break. Here's the DAX. The DAX happens to be coming back into that swing point high it broke. 91.93, trades down to 92.23 today. That's another 30 points to the downside if it wants to get there. Doesn't look to have the volume. That would be the retest regen. Actually, the retest regen has already taken place. That's simply support at this point. So we'll have to see how it wants to come in there and how it behaves. Now, the FTSE, I don't believe, was nearly as bad. FTSE got hit before. It's just doing its extension off of this last swing point break from yesterday. That one's about done. So I would think you get more extension down today on the European markets this evening, our time being US time. Daytime, of course, tomorrow in Europe. The key for our markets will be how does Europe react to that? In other words, do you gap down and then start to bounce, or just push down and start to bounce by the time we open here? And that will have a lot to do with how our markets behave tomorrow. Talking about our markets, let's flip to that because I haven't done that yet. So if I take a look at our markets, what we got here is, what do we got? Industrials down 94, 15, 9, 14, 915 roughly. And well, the reason I brought this up, or actually wanted to talk about it, is the listed issues were down the most, in particular the Dow. But still, the percentage losses, minimal. 0.3%. 0.5% on the Russell. Of course, it was down hard yesterday. 0.6 here, 0.2, almost even on the NDX. Apple up huge again, another 2.5%. It's 23% of the weighting of the NDX. Apple, when it's that strong, it's hard to get anything to sell off, and that's very true of the NDX. Let's take a look now at those markets, our markets, and see what we got here. I see I got a few questions tonight. Of course, we'll try to get to those. Got a couple mailed in as well. So I'll try to rip through these and see what we have. Now, last night, if you remember, we were talking about and considering the Russell. As a matter of fact, let's just go to the Russell first. We were considering the Russell as the tail. And what we were looking at and what we were wondering about was how would the Russell come back into the swing point high. It looked as if it would get into it today. It did. And I pointed out the real test to me would be this little zone here off of that bar. We came into it and actually got into the bar. And so if we look at the numbers, the low here, 119.68, gets you into that high, which is 119.98. Does slightly more volume, but the volume that you're testing against, swing point high, 352, you come back with 347. And of course your breakout bar, doing 305 on the breakout bar. So the real test is the heavier volume one. That's what it comes back into. Folks, it's about even on the volume. That says we could try to get into it again tomorrow. We have a doji tonight. Usually those, not usually, but those can certainly be tells in terms of turns after a move. This to me looks like it was a successful test today. We'll know tomorrow, but that's what it looked like today. If so, that's going to set up an ABCD structure back to the upside, back up into that area. On the weekly, it's really nothing special there. On the weekly, you could actually get a move. The weekly really doesn't show anything, so it's really on the daily. That was the tell today, and that was the one to be watching. Hopefully you were watching it and able to make a reasonable decision off of it. And then we go look at the rest of them. The SPX doesn't really tell you much. Volume expands a little bit as you come back. You'd actually have to get back. The key area here, you know, if I'm looking for areas to worry about, The key area here is the swing point high and the low. You know, if you were to break back underneath here, right, that would be more concerning, right? Get a break of that swing point low, that would be a little bit more concerning. Now, what would really be concerning is if this thing could actually trade all the way back down to these lows. Because if it did that, then it would actually be setting up a situation on the weekly to test the swing point lows as well. But as you can see already, those are a long way away. It would take quite a bit of a push to get back to here. So I don't see that happening right now, but is something to take a look at and to think about. If we go over to the NDX, no give up whatsoever here today. This thing just held, and you know, it was all about Apple. If we put Apple up, you can see Apple goes up and makes new highs today. Apple had some volume yesterday. It goes back up, tests that volume, and gets over it and stays over it. That says this thing can go higher. Google, Microsoft, still we're doing all right. The one that's probably hurting the most now on the listed issues is the Dow Jones. Dow Jones pulls back. It's testing that low, 15,865. Got to 15,859, closes over it. Volume was 1.03 into 843. So that says this thing can come back and test that low again. So it successfully defended it on price, but not on volume. Let's look at our major sectors real quick and see if there's anything there. I didn't flip through these today. I was out most of the morning and kind of got busy and didn't get to all this today, so we'll look at them together fresh. So IYT, volume expanding back into the swing point high. So that's a retest regen. Bottom of that's 128.26. You close, you go under it, you close over it, but you have more volume. That can test again. SMHs. So the semis, remember the semis have been stuck in this range. They still are. And there's still no clues as to which way they're going to break. I don't see anything there that tells me that. Let's see here. All right, now this one's interesting. So the XLB falls out of the top range. And this one's going to test this support area pretty hard, it looks like. So the bar of significance is the September 18th bar now. Top of it's 43.55. So you come into it today doing 5.9. You got 10 over there. Folks, that looks like a buy. That does look like a buy. So you come into it, you can't stay into it, you flip back around and out of it. That looks like it's going to bounce tomorrow. XLE. This one's just range trading. I don't see anything there. XLF. Okay, so the XLF comes deeper, but it doesn't have any volume. Alright, so this high was 2104, 2102, so it's already done a retest regen. That looks to me like that's going to bounce. XLI. And on the XLI, yeah, I don't really see anything here. A little volume expansion, but you know, you're coming back into nice bars. This has been one of the strongest indexes out there. That one still looks fine. XLK, I suspect is going to look fine given Apple, and it does. It's still holding at the highs. Let's see about the consumer durables. They're still ranging at the top. They still look okay. The utilities, they've been getting hit off of interest rates. They had a little bounce today, but again, I don't really see much happening there. The XLV, if you remember, had already met. This is the only one that has met its targets on the upside, and boy, when they do it, don't they? And I don't need to draw them in again, but there was two sets of nested ABCD structures bullish. It went up and finished them both off on one move there, and it's been drifting down ever since. XLY, let's see what this one looks like. Okay, so here we have Well, this one came off kind of hard today. So let's see. Too many windows popping up here. So the volume is all the way back down here in that area. It came into it. Okay, so the fact that it comes into it, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, actually it doesn't look bad. It looks like it's going to hold. So when I look back at the sectors, for the most part, they look okay. You got a couple of them want to work lower, but the rest of them look okay or ready to bounce some. Let me see what the ox markets look like. I saw gold was pretty flat. Oil had a huge move up. Let's look at oil first. You know, we were talking about oil a couple days ago. I think I even said that I expected it was going to break higher. And yeah, you got huge volume. This is short covering. You can tell by the structure of it. 34.32, and it closes over it, and it closes over that one as well. That is going to push all, and I believe this is exactly what I talked about. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but my suggestion is that oil was going to hold. Remember we had that. What was that news? Oh, it was the Iranian deal. The Iranian deal came out, and you got this spike down, but it could not hold, right? You got a little hammer reversal, and then the next day you were back inside the range there on that low. Well, once that happened, that kind of gave you a clue that this thing did not want to trade lower, and then today, supposedly OPEC's going to reduce their output, and this thing takes off, breaks swing points. You're going to get a farther extension tomorrow higher, and then we'll see how far it wants to go. But now what you have actually is you got some sort of an ABCD structure that's setting up to take it right back to do the retest regen off that low. It's amazing how these things work. Okay, so that was that one. Gold got under back over after a big push down. That one looks to try to bounce a little bit. Let's quickly check the bonds. That's a failure to get higher. Bond's probably going to be weak again tomorrow. Let's see what the munis did. And just an inside day volume still heavy. That looks to go lower. And junk bonds also inside day, no volume, which also probably is going to go lower. Let me see what silver did in tandem with gold. Silver's been the weaker of the two here on this sell-off, and silver couldn't even lift today. So you get a little bounce tomorrow, but I don't think it's going to carry very far, unfortunately, for gold bugs. Quickly look at the dollar and the euro, since the euro is so much of the dollar. And so the euro goes back up about the same volume. That looks to try to test higher again. Let's see what the dollar looks like. And the dollar actually looks like it held. So again, mixed signals there. While I'm at it, let me look at the British pound. Wow, new highs. That's another one of the larger weightings. That's testing the highs. Yeah. You know, one thing I can't rectify right now is the dollar weakness of the last few days, and this is kind of strange in a way, right? Because what we have is, you know, if you look over here on the weekly, maybe the weekly is the answer. What you have is you have taper talk starting to pick up again, yet this thing can't rise. Now, mind you, it does have an ABCD structure here if it can get going, right, and break back over and get itself back up to that high. But for right now, I mean, with taper talk in the air, this thing can't even move. So it's kind of an interesting situation to me. I don't know what drove the European selling today. I guess I need to go and look and see what they attribute it to, but I can't quite make sense of the dollar weakness here in front of the idea that you're not going to print as much money anymore. So anyway, that's strange. Let's look at some of these questions that I have emailed to me and the ones on the board. So, all right, so question here was, what was this one? Okay, so the question is with respect to SFY. Let's pull this up and see what it looks like. So SFY is, I think it's an energy company. Let's bring it up and see what we got. Oil and gas, it looks like. Okay, so oil and gas company. And so the question is where do you think would be a buy? And his thought is around 12.5. Okay, so 12.5 is that big low, which also overlaps here with this 62 number. So you can kind of see what this member, this TA Today subscriber, is looking at. He's looking at that little overlap there and wondering if that's going to be the buy point. So before we get too worried about the buy point, let's notice that on a weekly you got a nice big spike up with volume. If you look at it on the daily though, it was already tested and failed. Okay? You had a pretty good push. We're talking about from 11 to 15, right? So 11 to 15, that's $4 on 11. That's a pretty good push. That's 30 something percent. Well, not quite. It's 20 something, 25, I guess. So 25% push, pretty straight up, and then a blow off high that gets tested. That usually sets up a range trade, right? That's the makings of a range trade. So the way I would view this is, yes, this would be the area. It's probably going to be a decent buy in that area if you can get it there. And your target is to shoot right back for the top of the range, right up here. So you'll have resistance here first if you can get over that, and you can always see, and it's always kind of interesting too, that these ranges usually work out to be almost the same in terms of size, right? You can see it here on these. But you got a lower range. Your first target would be that area there, which is the bottom of this big bar. If you can get over it, then the target, of course, is the top of the range. So yeah, that's not a bad trade. And honestly, if you get into that trade, I give it nothing. You know, I put my stops right underneath it. I give it almost 0 because it really should not trade much lower than that if it's going to. All right, let's take the other one. So the other one was Tesla again. Okay, so Tesla, we've looked at before. They had a big day up today. I'll just pull it up this way because I don't need all the charts. TSLA, right? So big spike up, volume expands, so short covering, I'm sure. There's still a huge short interest in this. Now I haven't been watching this closely because I was waiting on about $100 in terms of where this thing could travel to. But if you look at it, you can see volume big here, right? And then it continues to test and can't break it down. Once it finally gets something that gets juice going, it gets its move. There is an ABCD structure here, and it looks to me like it's already finished it. And you're back up at resistance. And notice here, that's where the big bar is. You don't even have as much volume today coming back into it. I don't think it's going to go any farther. So if you did catch this, I would be a seller. The member here didn't tell me if he's selling or buying or what he's doing, but I would be taking my money. Because to me, this thing on a weekly is all it's doing is setting up an ABCD structure to make its way down to that price area that we're talking about. So let's just say it bounces here. What does it do? It brings it right back into that area. It's going to be interesting first off in a $100 area and then even lower. So I wouldn't stick around that guy. Another question here from the boards. Let's take these right quick. So we got Eli. Eli, I think, is golf. Callaway Golf. Yeah, Callaway Golf. Let's see what that one looks like. Okay, so the question is, could you look at it? I would like to buy at this price for a bounce off the strong volume bar with a stop at 778. Okay, so what do we got? Yeah, this isn't a bad spot. Yeah, this is not a bad spot at all. Okay, so the only thing you have to realize here, and again, a lot of times I would trade something like this on 2 time frames. I'd trade it on the short-term time frame, and I'd trade it on the long. You know, the long-term time frame, this is a retest regen that could regenerate anywhere within this range, right? So that's a big range, and the price point is that high. That high, let's go back and get the numbers off of it, is 758. We're trading at the bottom of this bar where the gap is 782. So you're not that far away. Okay, so that's the first thing. So I would probably trade it off of I would probably trade it off 2 time frames potentially. One of them I'd have a stop underneath, and I do like it here for a buy. I like this setup. I'd stop out very close underneath, and then the other one I'd put deeper, right? And I'd actually buy that retest regen if it comes in and has no volume as well. Your stop then on the weekly, of course, is underneath the big bar, back down into here somewhere. So yeah, this is a nice setup. And I would expect that what you're going to see, this is defined a range. A lot of these things have set up ranges. You're seeing this in a lot of stocks now, right? This one actually tested the top, failed, came back. That's a range trade. So what you're doing is you're buying it here and you're wanting to sell it up into here somewhere. And this one is actually set up better than the last one we looked at in that range, in that you don't have the middle to kill you. This one probably works its way all the way back to the top. So yeah, I like that one. I like that one a lot. Let's see what the next one is here. So the next one is C. What is this? CJJD. And what do these guys do? This is a Chinese drugstore. It looks like they do retail pharmaceuticals. Okay, got another big bar here. Is it worth the risk to buy? You're working off the weekly. No, I wouldn't buy it. One of the things I haven't brought up recently, and the reason for it is look at your monthly. This thing has been in a huge downtrend. All you did was you saw it test back into this big bar. It actually, no, I just, no. This is not something I would buy. Can it bounce back up there? Yeah. Can it make another run? Sure. If the markets take off, it will probably do so too. One of the things that always kind of tells me we're getting towards the end is when Chinese stocks, all the cheap ones, all the ones that have monthly charts that look like crap, they all start moving and they start getting these huge moves. It's just fast money chasing stuff. And that tells me we're getting, and the reason that happens is everything else is stretched. There's nothing else. You keep, think about it. You buy the best stuff first, right? Then you work your way down the list. Pretty soon you get to the junk, and you start buying the junk. And that's what these are, in my opinion. I don't know anything about this company. Just looking at the chart, though, that's the way it looks. Let's look at the next one. What is this? GGAL. And what do we have on this one? So this is, what do these guys do? Looks like a financial services in Argentina. Okay, so this is a nice setup too. This is a very nice setup. I don't know about Argentina, but the chart is set up well. And the reason for it, if you don't see it, and I'm sure you do, Alex, is is that you're coming back in. I talk a lot about retest regenerates. This is where you find out if you really have buyers or not. In other words, when you break out, right, and you make a push and you come back, right, you come right back down and you come back to the area, and what is that area? Well, that area is important. First of all, if you bought this bar, you bought at higher prices than it printed before on the expectation that there's going to be even higher prices to come. Otherwise, why would you buy at higher highs? You expect even higher highs. When the volume expands like this is not me and you. This is not mom and pop. This is somebody with a lot of money. So when you see that and you come back in to retest it and there are no sellers, right, into that same price area, that gives you a pretty good indication this thing's going to go back the other way. That's a good trade. Folks, I'm out of time. I do appreciate you being there, though. You know, tell a friend, tell two. As always, this is and was your daily TA wrap. You have yourself a great night. Check in here tomorrow. We'll see if we get that bounce. Looks to me like that's what's coming.